This evening I have the distinct pleasure in introducing our final recipient for the Distinguished Alumni Award. Eugene Megysey was born in Hungary shortly before the Hungarian Revolution began in 1956 with the Soviet invasion. He and his family successfully fled to Austria, and by 1959 they made their way to Tulsa, where Eugene found himself registering for 9th grade at Banquet. Despite knowing next to no English when he arrived in Tulsa, he earned the English language and faced the same academic rigors as the rest of the class of 1963. When he arrived in the States, he spoke only Hungarian and German. During his time at Bishop Kelley, he participated in a number of scholastic activities such as Key Club, and he graduated from Bishop Kelley in 1963 and was in the top 10% of his class. Upon graduation, he attended the University of Tulsa with a break for service in the United States military. He was awarded the Bronze Star for his tour in Vietnam. After his tour of duty, he completed his Juris Doctorate at the University of Denver in 1972. And Eugene then began practicing law with a distinguished law firm in Denver. Eugene eventually achieved the status of an environmental law director for the state of Colorado. Eugene wanted a democratic Hungary and worked towards that until eventually the communist rule of Hungary ended in 1989. Having been a staunch supporter of the democracy and active in his home country's politics, Eugene eventually became a senior advisor to the current Prime Minister of Hungary, Viktor Orban. His emphasis has focused on American affairs. From his important position in the Prime Minister's circle, he established a Hungarian consul in Denver and led the movement to establish the Chapel of Our Lady of Hungary at the National Shrine in Washington, D.C. Eugene is a faithful Catholic and an active member of the Knights of Malta. He has hosted Kelley alumni visiting Budapest and has donated over 2,700 computers to the school system in Hungary, among other things. Eugene is an outstanding representative, the caliber of student and person Bishop Kelley strives to produce. Please welcome Eugene Megysey.
Thank you, Father. Father Kastl, ladies and gentlemen of the Bishop Kelley family, it is a great honor for me to be recognized today as a distinguished alumnus, and I wish to thank those who thought me to be worthy of this. I was surprised that I'm worthy of it. Some of my classmates conspired without my knowledge and recommended me, and I hope that the basis of their recommendations were not overly exaggerated. Do not worry, this will not be a Hollywood type of thank you where I will list my grandmother and my grandfather as people to thank. But since this is a life preparatory school, I would like to talk about, not only because I don't like to talk about my life, but the way this school prepared me for the life that I led should be an example for others and should be a demonstration of what this school has given to me and to thousands of others after me. Seriously, I have numerous reasons and factors that led me through life that made me be what I am. And first of all, it's my family and my background. My family goes back in Hungary. We can trace the family tree back to the 16th century. And in that family, I had ancestors who were civic-minded landowners, politicians, soldiers, pharmacists, and even some lawyers and judges. They often held very strong views about politics and the fate of their country. At times, they risked their lives for those beliefs. They believed in family, God, and country, which in part may have been passed on to me. So it is not my doing what I have done in my life. It's what preceded me. My immediate family also believed in these basic concepts. And in fact, in 1945, I spent 5 months before my birth with my mother in a bunker as bombs fell and the Russians and the Germans were fighting outside our house in Budapest. Then came 11 years of trying experiences under a communist dictatorship in a small town, as we had to move for political reasons. Had to move from Budapest. Then came the 1956 Hungarian Revolution, and when it was suppressed, we fled just with our clothes on our backs to Austria at night, avoiding the border patrol. I was enrolled in a Jesuit boarding school and began to learn German. Almost 3 years later, an immigrant quota was established for Hungarians to the United States. We applied, and fortunately, we were approved and selected to go to a refugee camp in Austria before we could come to the United States. Through Catholic Relief Services, a sponsor was found in Tulsa. So we looked on the map to see where Tulsa was. We boarded a plane in Germany, a prop plane in Germany, 1959. We flew to New York, and they took us to Grand Central Station. They gave my family 4 train tickets, gave us $5, and wished us a happy life in the future. We traveled 2 days, day and night, to Tulsa, where we had a sponsor whom we didn't know. But the gentleman and the family were nice enough to extend their helping hand as we arrived in June of 1959 in Tulsa. We spoke virtually no English, and I was enrolled at Marquette School, and since I didn't speak English, they said, well, you should start in the 8th grade. I should have been in the 9th grade, but since I didn't speak in English, they thought I should go in the 8th grade. I went home to my parents the next day, and I said, you know, some of these things I already have heard, math and biology and the sciences, and they said, well, my parents didn't speak in English, and they said, well, why don't you go back and tell the sisters that you already know this stuff? I said, no, how should I tell them? I didn't speak in English either. So I went back with my, I like to gesture with my hands and some English that I learned in a few months. I went back and I explained to them that I already know this. They said, okay, well, fine. Then we moved you to grade appropriate, which was the 9th grade at Marquette. And there were some difficult times there, and we had, first of all, in the 9th grade, you had spelling. And the sister up front would say the more difficult words, and I was sitting in the back listening to see what was happening, and the sister said, hi, Gene. I raised my hand and said, hi. Of course, you can imagine 14-year-old, because the class loved this. So, as you can tell, I was a novelty in school, and you may even say I was an oddball foreigner, but I was compassionately received by my classmates and by my teachers. Then in 1960, I started at Bishop Kelley when the school opened, with brothers Bernardine, William, Alfred, Philip, where neckties were required. I don't know whether they're required now or not. The discipline was strict. Prayers were every day. And I managed to graduate under these circumstances. I worked my way through high school and college, delivering the Tulsa World and the Tulsa Tribune newspapers. In my spare time, I agitated against communism and the dictatorships in Eastern and Central Europe. And then I attended the University of Vienna. I hitchhiked through Europe. I served in Vietnam during the war and practiced law in Denver. I was always interested in politics and world affairs, since it had so affected my life. I became Hungarian consul in Colorado, did some charitable work in Hungary and Central Europe, computers, ski clothes, etc. And then began to help the campaigns of Prime Minister Orban, who was a right-of-center Christian Democratic candidate against the socialist, communist parties that were leftovers from the old regime that I left. I've been advising the Prime Minister since 2010, which has allowed me to travel throughout the world with him. So, there you have a short life history and a life preparatory message from a Bishop Kelley graduate. In retrospect, there were a number of defining influences and moments in this unconventional and adventurous life. Even under communism, when it was not advisable, my parents sent me to religion class. We attended church, even though the party members were making lists of those people attending the church. I attended Catholic schools for 7 years after we escaped, where moral values and discipline were critical elements. And by the way, when talking about discipline, Bishop Kelley, I think the discipline in those days was probably not conventional today, and you may get maybe the brothers may get sued if they applied the same discipline that they applied then. Brother William, for example, one of the first days got a hold of my necktie and kind of slapped me around back and forth, two sides. Brother Bernardine, with his daily prayers and his pinching of your soft underarm, was a favorite tactic, and also with his fingers, two of my fingers or one of his fingers, and he would usually punch you in the side and call you Joe, and Madam. Ladies were Madam always to Brother Bernardine, but these memories and the discipline that I received, which today is probably does not muster today's requirements, have made me what I am. I went to Vietnam with the New Testament that my uncle brought home from World War II. He was able to bring it home, and so was I able to bring it home. I experienced poverty, which gave me compassion for the homeless and those suffering political repression. Trusting God gave me a strength to face and conquer hardships, or challenges, as some would say. It would not have been possible without some core beliefs that came from my ancestors and family, which values in turn were reinforced by the schools I attended, including the most formative years that I spent here at Bishop Kelley. While I'm not a perfect example, but maybe occasionally I have exhibited some of the Lasallian values of generosity, fortitude, compassion, and commitment. I'm grateful for the 3 years I spent at Kelley, which significantly influenced my life and served me well in the roller coaster of life. So the school really prepared me for my life, and I'm here. I've done what I've done because, in part, what Bishop Kelley gave me. Thank you for listening, and God bless you.